cómo puede existir el cine contemporáneo en México, y creo que fervientemente creemos que la única salvación que tenemos como sociedad contemporánea, y en este caso en el cine contemporáneo, es que todo lo podamos ver de forma horizontal. Entonces de ahí surgió la idea, horizontal lo vemos como que todas las personas estamos al mismo nivel y no hay jerarquías, más bien roles, y parte de la industria cinematográfica a veces se rige mucho por jerarquías y deja mucho fuera a todas las voces que conforman una película. Entonces fue la idea de ahí surgió la idea de crear un diálogo entre diseñadores gráficos que siempre están en la industria y son parte esencial del ciclo, y pues ya se me fue el avión, pero pues básicamente es eso, o sea, como tratar de ampliar la industria a nuevas miradas y crear un diálogo también a través del espectador, que en este caso fueron ilustradores, y esperemos que no siempre sean ilustradores, sino más bien público en general, pero tratar de ampliar el diálogo a que lleguen más personas y que el cine contemporáneo no se quede siempre entre los mismos. Y pues eso, de ahí salió la idea, y pues la muestra está justo afuera. Son 11 carteles por 11 ilustradoras. Creo que conscientemente elegimos mujeres ilustradoras porque no siempre se le da voz a la mujer, y menos, como podemos ver aquí, somos mayoría en espectadoras, pero no siempre mayoría en el otro lado. Entonces, esa es la idea. Muchas gracias.
Just for our guests, she said that the intention was to create a dialogue to deconstruct the pyramidal structure of cinema, and I hope you enjoy the dialogue we have with the posters outside. I think this one is from... Sorry, of course it was yours. No, it's my stand-up, it's over, so I left you with the great Cronk. Thank you for coming, and I remind you that this is live streaming, global, on our social media, so be careful with what you said.
Good to know. Thank you, Pedro. Thank you guys for coming. As you can see, we have a rather large panel, and making things more interesting is that the films are all very, very different in many different sections of the festival. So I'm going to try to get to everybody and also open it up to you guys eventually to ask questions. But this is convenient that we have these three people sitting here, since my first question is pertaining a little bit to documentary. One of the through lines between some of the films here, I think, is like an engagement with nonfiction elements and how that corresponds with, I don't know, traditional narrative, I guess. And you can see that, I think, in MS Slavic 7 and 7 Years in May quite a bit, and then or 7 Years of May. And then also in Behind the Shutters, which is probably the most recognizably nonfiction film amongst the films here. So to start, maybe each of you can maybe talk a little bit about how your work relates to nonfiction. Obviously, Affonso, you draw on history, political history, and things in your films, whereas Sofia draws on personal history, family history, and things like that. And then Behind the Shutters, of course, is also a very personal film as well. So I was just curious what your relationship is with nonfiction and how you see your work relating to documentary in general.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. We were talking a lot about docufiction on our way over here, and I guess like working in hybridity. So with me, my film started with exploring my family's history. So the first film that I made was about my grandmother, who was in her 80s trying to contact a lost love that she knew when she was in her 20s. And it was a story that happened between the two of us that I wanted to tell, I guess, on screen, but it was too awkward for me to be in a film, and I didn't want to make a documentary, and I also didn't want to act in my own film either. So I started working with an actor named Derek Campbell, who I co-directed MS Slavic 7 later on in Never Eat Alone, and she acted as like, I guess, like a version of myself, like a different family member, and we kind of created this character named Audrey Benak, who wears my grandfather's clothing sometimes, lived in like my cousin Grace's apartment, and is kind of different pieces of different family members, pieces of myself, also pieces of Dara, but interacts with my family. So in MS Slavic 7, we're exploring letters that belong to my great-grandmother that I found in an archive in Harvard, and it's about discovering those letters and, I guess, studying their contents. So what we did with that film is Dara actually came to my great-aunt and uncle's 60th wedding anniversary, and it was an experiment just to kind of see how that would go, and we had a structure for the narrative. But what we did at that party was we sat her down at the head table, and I had her interact with different family members, and I wasn't really sure how we were going to use that footage, but it ended up being something that we structured within the film, within these narrative points of her going to the library, looking at these letters, but also kind of incorporating this footage of her interacting with my family. So that's kind of like where I started. Sometimes there are pieces, I guess, of my own story and history that go into the film that Dara, I guess, like reenacts, but also there's that real life element as well.
Messi, maybe you can talk about, you also work with archival materials in your film, so correspondence with Sofia's film. So about the letters that are in the film and the materials you're drawing on, and also maybe just describe the film a little bit for people who might not have seen it yet.
Okay, how it works? Okay. Yeah, for me, it's an important question to ask about the fiction and documentary, but for me, it's when you film an image or an archive, it becomes also fiction, and that's what I try to make it in the movie. It's always to put subjectivity and to remind that the image is an image and it's not reality. So the question about documentary as fiction is, for me, is both mixed, and yeah. So. Yeah, I don't know if I should tell.
Well, your film, it deals with a factory that your family owned, and kind of you tell a story of how you go to live with your great-grandmother, correct? Across from the factory, and then you're kind of integrating all these materials that you're finding and also telling the history of this factory and how it relates to you as you were pregnant, correct?
Yeah. Yeah, so it's for me it's like sorry, I can't explain it in English. It's a traveling in a small place, and I experiment, and I take everything I could to experiment these materials in a very little place.
Right. And Affonso, you also, it's very, I feel like your films also has personal elements to it. Can you tell the audience a little bit about where the story came from with the this kind of beating this character is taken by the police, and how you're having, I'm not actually sure if it's an actor or the actual person reenacting this kind of a situation that happened, and then him telling the story and how that relates to the real life situation?
And good morning. Is it work? Actually the film will be screened for the first time today, and so I don't know if anyone here could see the film. So yes, just to complete for you to have some kind of a big picture of the film, it's a film based on a story of a friend of mine who once was beaten by the police by a mistake. He was mistaken as a drug dealer, and the police, as the police in Brazil, maybe in Latin American countries, or not only here in third world countries, are so violent, and they tortured him for an entire life, and this night changing his life forever. And the film is based on to try to rebuild the memories of this night and try to deal with the personal memories and the cinematic language, on experiment different ways to try to portray a very traumatic event on this character's life. So it's totally based on a real event. It's totally based on his personal memories, but at the same time, for me, it's a matter to make a conjunction between the personal memories and the language and the construction that cinema could bring. Because for me, especially because of my political intent, it was a way to portray an individual and a particular life as a collective matter. For me, only cinema can do this, can build this bridge to this event. Because for me, it's important to understand in Brazil that it's not a only event that hasn't happened only to him. It happens all the time. It's a collective issue in Brazil. So for me, the cinema, it's a way to build and to portray this correctly. And you were right. I think that it's on my previous films. I also deal with this kind of mixing point between fiction and documentary. And I think that I don't have a very good explanation for this. I think that it's only, I was pushed to it because of my preference, because the film that I like and my feeling in dealing with the subject of my films. But during my films, I was understanding that for me, to deal with the reality, to deal with the documentary, it was a way to push the cinema to other places, to other faces and to other constructions that different than the commercial and the industrial one. I think that for me, the documentary influence in my films has come some kind of two faces. It's a matter of approach of the subjects, an approach to the bodies and to the places. It's an ethic way to deal with them, but at the same time, for me, it's a matter of method. And I think, and I'm truly convinced right now that to the independent cinema, to be really independent, it's a matter of to find different ways of making films. And for me, I think that this different way, it's related to documentary, because the fiction, the feature fictions, the big films and the big way to making films, how industry works, I think leave the things a little bit more square. And the way of making documentaries can contaminate our creation as a filmmakers and can bring other elements. And for me, to be independent, it's a matter of this as well. And the other part, like this approach to the people and places which we record in our films, I think it's a matter to find different ways of creating fiction. For me, the fiction, it's the final point. It's always the final point. But we can begin from documentary. And for me, especially in our contemporary world, where we can see the importance and the almost overdose of images, self-creation, and of the images all the time. For me, the cinema, it's a matter to understand how can we bring some truth to the images again, because the fiction, especially the classic Hollywood fiction, can feel us some truth about the world in the films that we haven't seen. The Fritz Lang's and John Ford's film, they can show us some things, some truths about the 20th century. And now, the fiction is on a different level. And for me, it's a matter to try to find another truth to these images. And this truth it's a matter of construction, of course, but it's a construction that is based on the reality for us to understand how can we bring different energies and different truths for the image, And for me, it's a matter for me, this is the way to mixing fiction and documentary. It's a gesture to understand how can we create different kind of films, making them in different ways, and how can we make our image to be like a sign of the world that we are living, and not only publicity and not only commerce.
Henning, your film Jang, which has screened yesterday and I believe screens again soon. What? Sorry. I was saying your film has screened already and will screen again soon, so you should see it, called Jang. I'm curious about how your film might relate even tangentially to nonfiction. You have these scenes of the women speaking to the camera in these kind of like documentary type setups, and you're also drawing on contemporary youth culture. Can you talk a little bit about how you, researched this or learned about these various situations with these women, and then also how you chose to portray the kind of, or structure the film as like a series of narrative elements interspersed with talking heads, like documentary sections?
I mean, I didn't plan that to put it in the movie. It was just, it just feel natural in the moment to let the girls talk to the audience about what they feel and think, to mix the scenes which are staged with the life, or a lot of, I mean, a little bit intense life. Maybe for some people never saw something like this, with situations also sometimes dangerous, and you don't know. I think that my idea was, or the idea was, that when you see it and we leave the headshots in, you don't maybe know what I just saw. Was it now real, or I'm confused. So to just keep it interesting, it's not a classical narrative. So yeah, for me it felt natural to put them in and let them think and let them talk about each other or about what they feel.
How does it relate to your life? Maybe you live in Berlin, I'm assuming, and you are witnessing this kind of a youth generation and these activities these girls are involved in, which range from, casual drugs to kind of selling themselves, their bodies in various ways. Can you maybe just talk about how you were kind of relate to this stuff and how you came across certain of these activities you see in the film?
I think everybody knows people who have problems with maybe addiction or drugs, or I don't know, or even like, it's not only a movie about young people for young people. It's especially a portrait of a generation today, and I think you can find these kids everywhere in the world, in every capital. You find them here in Mexico. You find them in Barcelona, London, New York. I don't know. It's a culture thing to rave and go to parties and free, and with this. For me, it was just feeling natural to put my experience from my life in a movie, because I can only make a movie about something I know, a world I know, and not. For me, it's not interesting to write a story completely out of the blue. More showing what's going on and make people forget about themselves while they watch a movie. I think is why I wanted to make this movie. So you have 90 minutes free time of your own madness and your depressions and all your shit in your life. And then after the movie, you maybe have some kind of feeling which will stay. And then it was success to watch the film for the audience. I make it for the audience, right?
I think maybe some of the younger people here might be curious how some of you came to filmmaking. I know some of you actually didn't start in film. Messaline, I know you started in philosophy and literature. Marius with photography, if I'm not mistaken. You work as a photographer as well. And Henning, you're an actor as well. And then the others, maybe you guys also came to film and maybe through a different practice of some sort. I'm curious if any one of you want to talk about how you kind of transitioned to directing films, if you started in a different medium or practice before, and maybe how that relates to what you're doing now. Marius, you do photography as well, correct? Oh, either one. It doesn't matter.
No, sorry, I'm a bit tired.
Whoever. Yeah.
Anyone, okay.
Okay, let's start with you, Messaline. You study literature and philosophy, correct? How did you come to filmmaking then?
Sorry, how, what? I am lost in translation. I studied philosophy, and I experimented images because I was in an art school, and cinema as a language was for me the only solution to be able to put together the thought and the vision and the image, and I discovered the sound. So it was, completely. For me, it's the cinema is the best way to make the discovery of mental connections, and it's amazing.
And Henning, can you talk about how you transitioned from acting to making this is one of your first films, correct? That as a director?
Yeah, it's the first.
I know I was talking to Henning, but you can continue. Yeah, this is your first film, though. Yes.
It's so funny.
Yeah, sorry.
Well, I was in front of the camera, but I never thought I'm an actor or something. Like, since the first day I worked with this director Klaus Lemke, it's an experienced filmmaker from Germany. I was 17, so I play myself in front of the camera pretty much all this, 10 movies we shot together. It's always more it was not about being an actor or something, it was about having the need to make a movie all the time, because making a movie once and you like it and you go through it, you miss it after you finish the movie and you need to make a new movie. So it's only about the next movie, and this changed now from me being like his assistant and maybe his character in front of the camera to, okay, dude, I need to make my own stuff and tell my own stories. And that's how I don't want to say I'm a director or something. I just like to make a movie.
Right. And Marius, can you talk about your maybe two practices, and if they relate at all?
You mean photography and well, acting was more or less an accident. I mean, I had a friend who wanted to make a film. Hi everyone. Sorry, I didn't say hello. So I had this friend who wanted to make a film, and she had no budget, so she wanted to make a film that was personal and in the same time easy to make. So she asked all her close friends to be in that film, and I was supposed in the beginning to play a small part, and then the part just got bigger and bigger. And it for me it had this is personal, it might not be relevant in any way, but it had a therapeutic effect, because we were shooting at nighttime, and in the daytime I was staying in a hospital with my grandfather. So it was actually very helpful mind-wise, because it was helping me escape from that. And going back to photography and telling stories through image, basically, is like, I think everything is linked. I mean, being a director and being a photographer and wanting to tell stories is, for me, more or less the same thing. And what the breakthrough for me actually came when I was at the NFTS, the National Film and Television School in the UK, because there they were doing something which seems basic in a way, and in the same time was very useful. At each decision that we were making, they were asking why. Why do you want to tell this story? Why do you want to tell it in such a way? Why do you choose this actor? Why do you choose this setting? And I think this should be the most important thing, actually, for us as filmmakers, to ask ourselves why we want to tell a story and why we want to do it the way we do it. And if we have the answers to these questions, I think it gets easier and it gets more relevant both for us and the audience.
Right. The films amongst you also range in, I think, obviously in terms of budget and resources. Some of these are very personal, no-budget movies almost. And then I think someone like György, you're working with a bigger budget, I'm assuming, with some special effects and things like that. I'm wondering, well, one, if a couple of you want to talk about raising funds to make these movies while also staying personal. I'm sure the students are probably curious how some of you here making the smaller films are raising the money, and then also how people who are making, even Janis, your film is a little more, it seems like there's a slightly bigger budget as well. Can you talk about how, we'll start with György, how you started to raise money for his master's voice?
Oh, it's that is the most hardest part of the filmmaking, I think, to find money, find the possibilities. You make your own ideas, dreams, and at terms, this is my huge problem too. I think this is my 6th features in my life, but that is the second one what I could make from budget. So and all of the movie looks like bigger budget than really is, because if you don't have enough money, but you put the work into a long term, this is time or money. So it's we had less money, and that is why we shooted this last movie more than 4 years. So we shoot it, we waited, and we work on it, and the CGI made by 3 people, but that was more than 2 years. And on the screen looks like it's a very expensive American Marvel movie. It's but I believe much more important to find good and creative people who put the work inside than to spend a lot of money. I would like, of course, but that was but the budget was big. It's usually 3 million euros, and this came from the government, and we applied for it, and looks like this is very much, but that is my last 10 years works to get such a money like this. And at the same time, I work on it a very, very low budget movies. It's it's 50K or nothing.
Janis, with your film, it's called Foam at the Mouth. I'm curious, one, about the story and where maybe you got the idea for this kind of this relationship, marriage breaking down, and kind of integrating that story into this wider story about a kind of dogs that have been I can't think of the name or like the term, but that are like been contaminated or whatever. There's a disease going around. Yeah. Can you talk about how you develop the story and then how you start to raise money for this semi-strange experiment?
Yeah. Hi everyone. I just realized we went to the same film school. To NFTS. Yeah. Yep. Let's talk later. Yeah, actually, the film Foam at the Mouth, it's actually based on an American script by Matt Gossett. I read about it in internet, and I just liked the synopsis. It's quite a different movie in American version. It's when Amazon started their kind of screenwriting grants, then the first year, I think it got the first prize or something like that, and then 2 years passed from there on, and Amazon lost the rights, and then we bought the initial version of the script, but then it got quite heavily adapted and rewritten for Latvia because obviously there's things and relationship dynamics and kind of social structures that change once you kind of move it from a one society to another. But then, if you were talking about how funding and stuff like that, then similarly, everywhere in Europe, it's mostly European Union and government funds and combination of those. So it's basically you have your initial seed funding from your home country, then you look for co-production partners across, and then if you find any, then you might be entitled for European Union funds and so on and so forth. So it's kind of like this kind of chess game of trying to put several of these things together. And of course there is, especially in Latvia, where we have like 2 million people, it's very, very hard to talk about industry as such at all, because you can't. There isn't really no market in classical terms. You can't really release your movie and hope that it's gonna make a profit, because there's simply not enough people to repay any kind of investment.
And what about maybe Affonso and Sofia? I know you guys are making smaller personal work, presumably with quite a smaller budget. Can you talk about raising, like for a 40-minute film like 7 Years of May, how you're getting the money to do this, and then, yeah.
Maybe not getting money. Yeah, this film, it's story, the financing story, it's a little bit raw because it starts with the film from my city. It's a very tiny city from Brazilian terms, and there's no culture investments at all. It's a working class and working class city, and there's a lot of investments, but not anything regarding culture at all. But they create a first culture fund, and it's almost a symbolic culture fund that can finance anything, and I send the film to them, and they send me the support, and the support was $3,000. And so I started the film with $3,000, and so when I start to record, it was insufficient. So I need to take my cash and to make some loans to put on the film. And then I finished the first part of the recording, 2017, but I started the editing and I wasn't satisfied. And I realized that I should do a second recording part. And because of the film festival, I was driving around with Raverdy, and I know Argentinian filmmaker that now he's my friend, that I really admire his short films, that it's Teddy Williams. And we were there in Colombia, and we are talking about next projects. I told him about this film, and he asked me how much money I have. When I said $3,000, I said, oh man, it's so little. And he offered me to put me in contact with their producing company in Argentina, and told me, well, maybe you can do something together. Maybe in Argentina you can do the post-production. Well, if I shouldn't pay the post-production, for me it's it's something that I shouldn't pay. It's good to me. I send the film to them, to script, the things that I will have recorded. They like the film. They put it in order from Buenos Aires, and we got the money to make the post-production. But I should make the second part of the recording. I paid by myself as well. And we make the second recording in 2018, and then we go into to make the post-production in Argentina. And we finished the film in the beginning of this year, and I was with this kind of a debt, and hopefully, and thank God, we received an award in Vision do Real, and I gave my money back, and that's the way the film was financed.
It's always the goal. Sofia, maybe you can talk about funding in Canada. I know that's one of the more contentious topics within independent Canadian cinemas. Who's getting the money from certain organizations? Or maybe I just hear about it more because it's in English media news, but Maybe you can inform people about how that all works and how it
like our granting system.
Yeah, and how it's affected your work.
Yeah, so we're really lucky in Canada. We have like 3 different funding bodies. So there's municipal funding, there's the Toronto Arts Council, there's provincial funding, there's the Ontario Arts Council, and then there's federal funding, the Canada Arts Council. It's a privilege to have that kind of opportunity to, I guess, flesh out a project before you make it. And to have the chance to apply for that kind of funding, because I know that those kinds of systems don't exist everywhere. I did a panel like 2 or 3 years ago in the US, and I was talking about applying for grants and how it was such a nuisance, and a student put their hand up and they were like, we don't have granting systems here. And it was in that moment I was really ashamed of myself, actually. But I was like, we're so privileged to have this. But again, within this system, just because you write a grant doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get the money. Like, I'm still writing grants and sometimes not getting them, but my philosophy, and I think it's really important for all of you to think of this as students, is the more that you write and the more that you put your project out there and the more that you ask, the higher chance and the higher probability that one day your film will get that funding. And sometimes, like, you can get like pretty disheartened when you like pour everything into a project. Like, I just wrote a grant recently and I did not get the funding, and that was really shitty. But you kind of have to look at it as an opportunity to flesh out your project, to kind of look at those details, to think about how you're going to shoot it. And you have to realize that you're not entitled to it either. It's not owed to you. It's a privilege to have that opportunity to apply for it. And in regards to making, I guess, MS Slavic 7 and like a model of funding that I'm actually trying to get away from, was when I had a full-time job, I had the opportunity to apply for a line of credit. So it's like a credit card, but the interest rate is a lot lower. So I started making films with lines of credit. So the system would be, I would get an idea, and I didn't want to wait for the funding, because sometimes you can apply for a grant and it can take like a year to get the money, and or 2 or 3, it can take forever. Like, my boyfriend just made a film and it took him 6 years to get the money. And I was always afraid of the idea that I had and the energy in the moment going stale, and just kind of like losing the idea for the film. So with MS Slavic 7, I found these letters. I was really excited by them, had them translated. Dara, the co-director of the film, pitched this really interesting structure to me. We had like a week free in the summer, and everything just kind of lined up. We got all of our locations for free. I just kind of begged and just tried to kind of like finagle as many resources as I could. Shot at my great aunt and uncle's anniversary party, and tried to be as thrifty as I could. Got a lot of things donated in exchange for credits in the film, and we shot it. We just kind of went with that. And then a model that I've kind of created for myself is I shoot my own films, I edit my own films, I do all of like my Foley and sound design, and that's I guess like a survival mechanism, but also it's a way of kind of like controlling my films and being able to manipulate them and make them exactly as I want. And it's also cheaper because I'm doing all the labor. So what I did for MS Slavic 7 is we spent about $5,000 and we shot for a week. And then I applied for a Canada Council grant and we got $25,000 for post-production. I was able to pay myself back for what we shot because I hired myself back as the editor. So yeah, not a bad plan. Didn't make any money from it. You know, I kind of want to move away from that. I want to start paying myself, you know, for my work and finding different ways and different models to do that, because it's risky, you know, putting something on a line of credit and then hoping to get a grant. But I think that kind of pressure and that kind of stress was what kind of like pushed me to, I guess, try to make the film as good as it could possibly be. And I wouldn't necessarily like use that as like a model for yourself. I think it's important to kind of think about how you can use what you have to the best of your ability.
Jang, I'm not ignoring you. I'm waiting for a certain topic to come up. Your film, Winter's Night, which is a really wonderful movie, it's part of the Jeonju Cinema Project, or that's how it originated, correct? So I'm assuming that had different responsibilities and also was presumably funded through this project. Can you talk about how that project came about? You were invited to participate, I'm guessing, and then how it worked with the money?
First of all, my first feature is found from my graduate school, so this was very easy. And second feature, automaton from deposit of my house in Seoul. So I went to my hometown, Chuncheon. Chuncheon is the Korean title, is Chuncheon. Yeah, there is so nice and warm, cozy place of my parents. So they gave me food and anything. So the budget is, second feature budget is $12,000 US. And we made only 3 people, including me. Yeah, camera, recording, directing, me and other. And third feature film, Winter's Night, budget is $100,000 US. From Jeonju Film Festival. There is some foundation program. They selected every year 3 or 5 film, in Korean and international film. So they, I have a script, but it's only for fun. Yeah, and they believe previous my film, so they gave my money for my film, and then the script go to trash and without script, and I shooting with my actor and actress, but future, my first feature film, will be very hard to fund. Same in Korea. It's kind of art house film or something. Yeah, and that's all.
Your film, as a lot of these people are, kind of come from original screenplays. It seems like György, though, it's an adaptation of a novel, correct? By Stanislav Lem. Can you talk about the adaptation process of your film? And I don't know, I haven't seen other work of yours, but how often you work at adapting other texts, or if this is the first time experimenting with that?
No, not the first time. It's a very interesting subject for me, how turn a text to a movie. And I always find the novels, it's like a source and the base of an idea, because I think it's the literature is more has a more freedom and can be more brave than the movie. And that is why I always, when I read a good book and say, it's, wow, why I don't see a movie like this? If this author is so brave and can write the text, it's why I cannot see a movie like this. So that is usually, that was the first idea of my second movie, Taxidermia. I found a very good novel, and I adapted, and I tried to adapt it, and I wanted to make a movie such a same feeling inside after I read these novels. And that's happened with Stanislav Lem too. I liked very much how he played with the genres, how he played with different type of text, how he forget usually a story and talk about a problem, but at the same time it's very funny without real narrative. This is just a personal diary, but usually nothing happened. Just research of the very important sci-fi elements of the human world. And this is a message. So I tried to translate this book for a movie. I used different kind of cameras, I used different kind of genres, and I tried to be honest with the novels. But in the novels wasn't story, so we didn't adapt really the novels, we just use it, and usually we decide we're making a second part of the book. So we write a new storyline for the book, and we used like ideologically background and the main hero father's past. So it's that was our answer. How can we adapt an unadaptable novel?
Right. Marius, I have a question about your film Monster. I'm curious how you came to this. For those who haven't seen the film, it follows kind of a married couple in a separate storylines over the course of one evening, as they both kind of come to terms with their relationship by meeting other people. I'm curious how you came to this idea for the film, if it at all has related to you in a personal manner, and then also how you came to the structure where you're kind of following the two individuals separately, and then it kind of intersects more toward the end.
Yeah, well, I was interested in what happens with love after a long period of time, what happens with love in a couple that lasts for longer than, let's say, 5-10 years. And also I was interested by partial truth, and that's how I came to the structure of the film, because I think everybody can relate to this. It's like you have friends, for example, and let's say you have a couple as friends, and you hear his story, and you're thinking, yeah, he's actually right. She's a bit of a bitch, and then you talk to her, and you're thinking, oh no, he's a moron. Actually, she's right, and I think not many people go to the point where they're thinking, okay, maybe there's each one with his or her truth, and how do I actually position myself in this mix of partial truth? So I was curious about this, and I said, okay, let's try and see if this works, if we're portraying 24 hours in the life of this couple, and we're seeing in the first two parts his version, her version. And then in the third part, we see them together, and we see how the partial truths fit together.
And I know you were assistant to Cristi Puiu, I think, on his last film. I'm curious where I guess the most visible Romanian cinema for international audiences tend to be what people call Romanian New Wave. Your film is not really operating in that style. I'm curious, what you've learned from working with some of these other filmmakers, but then also how it relates, if at all, to your cinema, and then also how you're just coming to your specific style, which stands outside of, I guess, what is like a typical Romanian style nowadays.
Is this an earthquake? Okay. Well, I was very lucky to have this experience, because usually when you're a director, you don't get to, if there's one person in the crew that you don't get to work with, is another director.
Yeah.
So, I mean, probably everybody knows that assistant to the director or assistant director is a different job. So, actually, I worked on a film where I was helping another friend, and Anca Puiu, Cristi Puiu's producer and wife, was the producer on that project. And she talked to me one day, and she said, look, Cristi is making this new film, and he would like to work with someone who's not a professional assistant director, because he's fed up with the assistant director coming to him and saying, Cristi, we're really late, we can't shoot this again, we need to move on, and so on. So she said he wanted to work with someone who would understand how complicated this is. And I met him one day, and he's a very intelligent person and also a person who talks a lot. And because he's like, yeah, he's taking one thing and twisting it on each possible side. And I remember I went there at 5 p.m. and at 4 a.m. I said to him, I'm really sorry, but I think my head is not able to contain this information anymore, so I think we need to stop. But it was like, I mean, I still remember a lot of the things that came up in that conversation. And for me, it was very helpful. I mean, it literally felt like, how much was it? I think it was almost 10 months that I stayed in that project, and it felt like a third film school that I attended. Yeah, because he's very passionate about what he's doing, and he's very honest, and he doesn't sacrifice anything when it comes to his vision. I mean, if he wants to say something, the actors can die on the set. He doesn't care. He's gonna say the thing that he wants to say. And for me, it was very reassuring actually to see someone that doesn't make compromises when it comes to his vision in this case. So even when I had hard moments on my own shoot, I was like, well, I'm really sorry if this is complicated for you, but I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna give up, and I'm gonna get it the way I want to get it. And also what I really loved about that experience with Pistipui was that every morning, so we were starting the shoot at 9 a.m., but we were getting together at 5:30, 6 a.m., and we were having these very long talks about what we were going to shoot that day. And I feel I'm really lucky because I didn't just see one Sierra Nevada, I kind of saw all the possible Sierra Nevadas, and he made me witness his thinking process. So yeah, I think, I mean, style-wise, and Monsters is not at all what Sierra Nevada is. I mean, Christie is going for an honesty and a naturalism that I don't believe in fully. But in terms of acting, we are totally on the same page, and what he's doing is exactly what I want to do. I mean, I want to see real people on the screen, and I don't like false notes at all in acting. So, yeah.
Jang, your film also follows a married couple over one evening, very different in a very different way. The stories kind of intersect, and but they also have to come to terms with their relationship through these other people and encounters they come across throughout the evening. Can you talk about the conceptualization of the narrative, what you drew on for these characters, and just how you went about kind of structuring it in this way where it's kind of cyclical, it begins and ends in a similar way? Just how you come to this. Is it through the writing process, or is it something you're seeing as you're filming, or is it more maybe editing later?
I thought first structure and then story. And I wrote a script, but as I told before, I gave to actor script just one reading, have one reading together, but go through to trust to actor and step or don't bring the script in my field. Yeah. And then we talk about her life, his life, and my life, and my friends, or my parents. And then we recreate character and kind of story. And we decide history of the character, and a lot of facts, kind of facts, history of him, her, and then when shoot, Usually I shoot about 30 minutes one scene. So there is no NG in my case, and we shoot 1 hour or 40 minutes like documentary, fake documentary, and based on we talk about character before shooting, and I selected start and end of footage. And in Winter's Night, in case my Winter's Night, I shoot 15 days and finish it 1 week after shooting, because I edited and selected footage every day after shooting, and we finished it very fast. Yeah, it's about 1 month or 2 months. Yeah, that'll. And it's very important to me the length, duration of filming. So I asked to cinematographer how long we can take once. He told maybe 15 minutes. No, please make shoot to 4 minutes or 1 hour. I asked to them, and they thought, why he asked about duration something. Yeah. But it's very important to me and actor, because we don't have script. We don't have just only character history.
Janis, your film, like you mentioned before, that it came from a script that was already written, and I'm curious how that relates to you once you're on set with the actors. It's a very actor-driven performance piece. Would you say, or I'm curious what the relationship's like with the actors, and then with you in relation to the script that's already been done, since it's not an original script from yourself. Are you guys collaborating on and adding to these dramatic elements in the film, or is it pretty strict once the script is in your hands, or how does it work with the actors and yourself?
Yeah, I was very lucky to have the main guy, the guy who played the main part. He was we talked with him a lot, and we did a lot of rehearsals together in groups before, during the pre-production period, even a couple of months before the shooting started. And we did a lot of rehearsals and just kind of trying to figure out how things might develop. And a lot of that actually went in the film, stuff that we found in the rehearsals. And I brought that in and rewrote scenes and not talking about dialogue, because dialogue is already of course dialogue changes and you adapt and you adapt and adapt, and it's very, very fluid. But fluid up until the point when you come on the set. Once I think Cassavetes once said, my actors improvise, but it doesn't mean that when they come on the set they don't know what they're doing. They know very well they're doing. It's the work is done beforehand. It's been filtered out beforehand what works and what not. So, but also after the whole kind of rehearsal process is done, I usually reserve an hour from the shooting time every day when we just, spend time with DP on the set. And just I have the actors, we play out the scene, we're just going through the blocking. Even if we have been, to the location scout in pre-production, all that before, it's always very nice to get everyone off the set, because it gets very cramped and very loud, and, you get runners around, and, it's very, very busy. It's very nice always at the very beginning of the day, just to sit down as actors and DP and just all right, we're gonna go here and here, and the DP just walks in with you, and then then you discuss the shots, and then only you bring in the whole crew. They can have the breakfast before that, you know, and then you bring in everyone, and then the mess starts. But it's very nice to kind of keep the score quiet, you know. Otherwise, it's very, you know, especially with actors, you can easily find yourself in a situation when suddenly you serve the production. Somehow, you make things easy for production because you have to make it on time, and this has to be done in that way, and God forbid you end up in a situation when, when it becomes all about focus marks and all this nonsense, but rehearsals, I believe, is it's a very nice privilege if you can have them. I think it's a really, a golden minefield. You can find a lot of good stuff there.
We can begin to open it up if anyone has questions for specific filmmakers or about a specific film that you've heard about. Does anyone have any questions, comments, anything?
You can ask us anything.
It doesn't even have to be about the films, yeah.
Full answer.
There's one right there.
My question is about film Monster, and what I would like to ask is how do you find a topic to talk about, in this case this couple that is coming to terms? And because for me as a student it's very hard to stay faithful to what I care about, because there are so mesmerizing themes or topics that could seem to overwhelm people. A lot of social events in this context. So I would like, how do you find this truth in pursuing this topic and this situation that your film portrays?
Well, I did for once. Is this still working?
Sounds like it went.
Yeah, okay. So I did these interviews with married couples, long-time married couples, because I wanted to hear what their version of the story was. And I did the interviews one-to-one, so I didn't see them as a couple. I saw the wife, then I saw the husband. And a lot of information came from there, and actually the stories that I heard informed the story of the film. Like, I imagine you've seen the film, or no? Okay, that I shouldn't imagine you've seen the film. Well, there is a story there at one point. So when there is this encounter between two men, one of the men tells a story, and the story is one-to-one a story that I heard in one of these interviews. About a guy who was married and had kids, and he was working in Dublin. He was working in Ireland, not in Romania. So he had his family, his wife and his children in Romania, and he had a work colleague and in the same time a lover in Dublin. And he kept this situation going for 4 years, so he was basically living a double life. And so I think, on one hand you can say that, I got mesmerized too by deciding to introduce this story and other ideas from the interviews in the film. But in the same time I thought that it just made my starting idea, that of portraying what how love changes in a long-time relationship. I think it just made the story richer. And I think you shouldn't be afraid of changing, in a way, your reality and transforming your reality with the information that you're getting from the outside. I think, I kept on saying this to the actors and to the people that I was working with on this film. I said, if I'm leaving the set at the end of the day as stupid as I got there in the morning, then it was a wasted day. I'm not interested in that. If the reality leaves me exactly how I started, then either I'm stupid or reality is not, it's not what it should be. So I think one shouldn't be afraid of taking in reality is giving. And yeah, you need to keep your focus, but yeah, no, I think as long as you know why you're telling a certain story, then it's you shouldn't be afraid of reality. I feel like I said the same thing like 5 times. Yeah, okay.
Right there.
So my question is for Sofia. I was wondering, so you find these letters, and I presume, I don't know this, but I presume that you have like a fascination with written word, and it's very interesting to me. How do you take on something that can be seen as like a very uncinematic, if that's even a word, thing, and that you can take it on a film and put it on film, and you know, film literally just words. You have a beautiful rack focus. It's like a very precise focus that I'm, as an audience, I'm trying to read what's on the page, but I'm unable to read except like the first word of each line of the page. And it was very interesting to me. How do you decide that film is a medium in which you can take on these very still very rigid structures that are, you know, the letters that you use for your film?
Great question. Thank you for that. Yeah, you know, I have, I think in all of my films, I have like a fascination with the archive, like physical archives, but also the archive of the mind, how we remember things and how that impacts us here and now. And in terms of working with those letters, it was really exciting for me to discover these letters that depicted my great-grandmother. So she was living in Toronto after surviving World War II, and she was writing to a Holocaust survivor who was living in New York City in the Bronx. And they were both poets, and they connected on that level, and they had a correspondence of 25 letters, and that's what the focus of MS Slavic 7 is. And in thinking about making this film, we were thinking about how we could bring these letters to life, aside from reading them. And in a lot of the conversations that Dara and I had in conceptualizing the film, there were 3 elements that we were really interested in. And the first one was like the letters themselves as objects, which is spoken a lot about in the film. So like the physical object, what does the paper look like? How does it feel? How can we simulate or bring the audience closer to how these letters might feel in her hands? The second one was, you know, like the spirit of the letter. Benjamin talks a lot about, in some of his theories and writing about, you know, with the progress of like technology, people like to kind of like go back to the tactile things that you can hold in your hands. And I believe that, you know, every object has kind of like an aura and holds like the weight and history of its owner. And that was one thing I really wanted to explore, were these, I guess, these letters as these markers of existence between my great-grandmother and this man that she was writing to and corresponding with. So that was another element that we wanted to incorporate into the film, and we tried to do that in the scene where she's looking at the letters with an overhead projector. And examining them that way. And then the third part is the content of the letter. So what were the words that they were actually saying to one another? What were they sharing? And the character Audrey, she doesn't speak Polish. I don't speak Polish either. But what we were trying to, I guess, like explore and communicate, I think, with those letters is to try to kind of explore the idea that even though, like, I can't fully understand what my great-grandmother experienced, what she went through, how she survived the war, and I also don't speak the Polish language either, but does the weight of that history still exist here and now? How does that impact me? And can you, I guess, like, feel that history through the engagement of those objects? So those were things that we really carefully thought about in like developing the structure of the film, and those were things that actually Dara teased out when she pitched the structure, and then as we started to film it, it kind of took on a life of its own. I hope that answers your question. Okay.
Right there.
Hi, I want to ask, how do you manage to fight creative blocking
in terms of pre-production, when you're in pre-production, you're like working in the film, and you have your table like full of papers, like you're a lawyer. And then in production, there's like a lot of stress. Maybe your actor, it can arrive early, and you have problems in terms of light. And then in post-production, you have like a lot of material you have to edit and qualify and a lot of stuff. And in this process, you have to be like super creative in order to have a great film. How do you manage to fight this creative blocking between stress and anxiety and this? Thank you.
This creative what?
Blocking. Like when actors and like when you have to be, when you're in a creative process, when you have stress, you can like an impasse. Like
You mean? I think he means like if you're creatively blocked, when you how you guys deal with being creatively blocked during the process of pre-production and through the course of filming. Did anyone have particularly difficult time seeing the film to fruition? György, I feel like your film has so many different elements in it. Maybe
need to find out some method. How can you be on the set, and how can you work with it? Because it's not necessary always to be smart, and sometimes happened nothing in your hand, and then the block is coming, and that time for me it's usually I continue work. I hope nobody realized what happening inside. So I continue and try to do what I know, because a lot of people there. So it's you can continue a work. The stress is big because you have very short time to do what you prepare 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, maybe your whole life. Prepare for this moment to do something, and this is I know this is a huge stress, but I don't know how to say it. You can do it, so it's will be something in the end. It's I don't know why I need to answer first, but my last movie, what is here, his master voice. That was full of this chaos. The shooting, that was a very, very bad crew, a service crew from other country, not where I living. It's a different language, and they doesn't want to work because it's they believe they are professional without passion, without something to do a film, and that was a shocking situation for me. I always shooted a film with people who likes to make movies, who likes to record sound, who they likes to make a camera movement, or they likes to put the lamp something. And I got a professional crew, and that was totally shocked, and my mind blocked, because I always needed to tell, we arrived 6 o'clock in the morning, and now it's 9 o'clock. Where is my camera? Where is my pictures? Where is my monitor? You know, it's very hard to tell for the actor after something very intimate thing. After you laugh, after you shout 3 hours before. And unfortunately, you can see on the movie. So I try to save the movie. I try to cover the ideas, but in the editing room, in a silent, I realized all of the problem into the movie. So it's, but the movie is ready. Some people likes it, and it's, yeah.
Can
Go
I add
ahead, yeah.
something? I think it's really important, taking on what you said, it's really important to pick wisely the people you're working with, because yeah, it can be just horrible to be on the set and to realize that people are worrying about the dessert and the fact that the food is not going to be served in time, or you know, it's like it's cold here and there's a sort of a draft, so can we move a bit faster through this scene and so on. And but this is like joke aside, it's really important to have people that you trust and people you're working well with, because there are moments when you can block, and I think at those moments, and this is something I learned actually from Christy Puyo, is sometimes it's just wise to say, I don't know. I don't know how to do this. Let's discover this together. I just don't know it. Because I remember another Romanian director told me this story about this creative block, and he did something a bit unorthodox because he couldn't work with the actors anymore. He wasn't getting what he wanted to do. And he actually gave like 10 euros to one of the guys who was working on the lights and said, just go and break that bulb. So like this we can say we can't film today anymore. So they did that, and oh, oops, we can't film it today, so we'll stop and we'll come back tomorrow. So I think if you trust the people that you're working with, and if you have a good collaboration with them, you can just say when it happens, look, I'm stuck now. I don't know how to do this, because I think it's worse to do it just for the sake of doing it and saying, well, it can't get better, let's just do it like that. Let's do it like that and go through it. Because usually if you're doing that, it's going to get cut out of the film, so it's not worth the effort.
Any other questions? We'll go with her.
My question is for Woojin. I would like to know if this is your first time one of your movies is presented in Latin America or Mexico, and I would like to know if it's hard for you to create like a universal language in your filmmaking, because I don't know, for us sometimes it's hard to get the access of Asian cinema or South Korean films. So yeah, maybe I know people that cannot connect with that kind of films because of the cultural differences. So yeah, I would like to know if it's hard for you to create a universal language to connect with the rest of the world, or Mexico or Latin America, or is something that I don't know, that you just do the movie and you just hope that it connects with certain parts of the world or only with people of South Korea. So yeah.
It's a very difficult question, but I think most Korean, most close to Korean culture is most global, I think. So I focused only Korean unique things in Korean, and then I spend a lot of time with translator. Yeah, and then language. But cinema has image and sound, you know, and actor emotions. So I believe it can be connected without language. So I prefer image and sound than dialogues. But dialogue is important too. Also, but I prefer image and sound, storytelling, visual telling, and I hope global language. I hope made several languages, English or Spanish, something. But now I I can't speak English that well. But so I hope future. make Korean, English language film. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
You still have one? Yeah.
I know that on the screening you were telling us that you had the story from her beforehand. You made a short film, something like that. But I was wondering if you ever consider mixing the structure around. Let's say you can have the story of him first, and then she is like the background for him, or maybe you can have them two together and then the individual parts. And I was just wondering if you thought this was the most effective structure to do it, or if it was just what you envisioned from the beginning and you just didn't consider any other possibility.
Thank you very much. Yeah, again, a very good question. And we thought about this quite a lot. I mean, this was the initial structure and the structure I had in the script. But there were moments when we thought, what if we would twist this around? And we even thought at one point, what if we make a structure in parallel? We see a bit of her, a bit of his story, and so on, and move back and forth in between the two stories. Also, it didn't help the fact that when we started having the pre-screenings, when we started showing the film, a lot of people were finding the second part more interesting than the first part, and they were saying that the film starts a bit too slow. So the thing is that to me, even though it might be less appealing, let's say, for the audience, this structure helps with the whole idea I wanted to convey with the film, is that it's very easy to judge and to label people without understanding what's happening to them. And if I would have put the stories in the opposite, I mean not the opposite, if I would have started with his story, her problem would have been clear right away, and I think people would have turned her instantly into a victim. So, I wasn't interested by that. I mean, even now, yesterday, some people told me like, yeah, but she's so sad in the film. And, you know, I mean, just imagine that with, in the situation in which the structure would have been his story and her story and then their story together, probably everybody would have looked at her at the poor woman, that's why she's so sad, because he's cheating on her, and so on and so on. So I think probably I thought that the gains are the biggest with this kind of structure, but yeah, I mean, it would have been interesting. We even thought at one point, you know, if this would have been shot on film and it would have been shown there were different roles of film, if somebody would have like mixed the roles and started with his part and then show her part, what would the effect would have been? I don't know, maybe in the future we can try and have a special screening and like mix things around. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, I told you why I chose this, and also maybe it had something to do a little bit, now I realize, with inertia, the fact that her part was the one that I've done as a short film in 2015, and that was, to me, it felt like the story that I already knew and I already told, and I don't know, maybe it felt natural to be the first part in the big film. I don't know if I answered your question. Yeah, okay.
Oh, go ahead, yeah.
I must go.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, we're done pretty much. Yeah.
I'm bored.
Is anyone have any other last questions?
Good luck. Thank you.
Yeah. We're getting toward the end here, but yeah, go ahead.
So I was also wondering, Marius, that you seem to have like a very specific way of working with actors, and I was wondering if you could maybe just show us through a little bit of your process with Monstry. Okay, yeah. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Tell us or describe us how do you prepare actors for a role?
Well, I think there's no recipe with that, and if I can tell, is like with him, I worked for 1 year, so with the main actor, and we rehearsed, and he didn't even know at one point if he was still in the film or not, because we were like changing so many things and tried. I mean, I rewrote the script quite a lot for his bit. and with her, she entered, so the main actress entered in the film 2 days before we actually started shooting, because I decided 2 days before the shoot that I'm not happy with the actress who was playing the part, so I just made my entire crew and especially the producer go completely crazy, and I said, well, this is not working, I'm not gonna do this film with her, I'm gonna choose this Judith. So the main actress had just one tiny part in the film, she was appearing in just one scene, and when we rehearsed there was something about her that just caught my eye all the time, and I couldn't focus on the other actors because there was this sadness and this, how should I say, she seemed preoccupied by something all the time, that it seemed like something was in her mind all the time. So what I want to say with this is that with some actors you need to work a lot and you need to find the character through I don't know, like trying things, testing things, rewriting, bringing, sometimes I feel that with the main actor I kind of brought the character towards him also, not just him towards the character. And with some actors, like it's the case with Judith, you just have I felt that she was my character, and even I think for him it was much tougher than for her, because with him I was doing like 30 takes, 40 takes, and I was getting angry and I was saying, this is not right, you didn't get anything from what this character is supposed to be, and with her I was doing 2 takes and I was like, this is it, I don't want to change anything. So I think you need to adapt to reality. With some actors you need to work a lot, if you think they're right for the part, and with some actors it can, she was like doing tiny gestures, or she was looking or saying, I don't feel like doing this now, I feel like just taking some more time and afterwards going, let's say, to the window, and I was saying, yeah, try it and let's see it, and it felt natural. So I think that putting these two together, if you manage to make the actors understand what you want to get and who the characters are, then I think you should allow yourself or allow them more to go their own way to that. Oh, this doesn't sound like English. You should allow them to find that character in their own way, and it's even if it's not 100% what you imagine in the beginning. With this film, I think except 2 actors, none of the actors is my initial choice. Some of them, as I said in the Q&A, died. Some of them couldn't do the part. Some of them, I don't know, with some of them I started really big fights. So anyways, but more on that.
I think we've come to our time limit here, but the filmmakers will be around to chat if you want to talk to them personally, but you should go see their films as well. But join me in thanking our guests.